All right, welcome back, everybody. Before we get started here, I'm going to introduce our three guest speakers. So up on the screen here, we have Vidhuma, Surakshita, and Thiradhamma. And I thought it might be fun to see something what they used to look like. So there we have Vidhuma, probably around the time of his ordination, I imagine, sometime in the mid 90s. And there's Thiradhamma. You'll notice that in the background, the domes don't have shingles. This is what they used to look like.
Yeah.
The tar was meant to keep it from leaking, and it didn't work.
No.
And then here's Surakshita in one of his classic poses, studying. Yeah.
I love it.
Probably back in the early 90s. But wait, there's 3 of you, but there's 4 photos. Why is that? Whoa, who's that? That's Thiradhamma and myself in the year 2000.
Oh my gosh.
So a little bit of history there. We're going to be, for those of you who follow us on social media, we're going to be posting quite a few historical pictures over the weeks. We've already been posting pictures of people that we've lost, that have died, and we'll be posting little albums of historical photos from the last 40 years as we progress through this 40th anniversary here. I just wanted to say about the 3 of these wonderful people is that they were all already here when I started coming to Aryaloka in 1992. And they had, I think they came in at different times. Thiradhamma right from the beginning. You're going to hear about all of that. But I had the pleasure of going on pilgrimage in India with Surakshita and Thiradhamma in 1994 and witnessing Thiradhamma's ordination in India. And I had the pleasure of doing Mitra study with them, going through the ordination process with them, and also being on the board of Aryaloka with them back when I lived here. And I was newly ordained in 1998 to 2002, so I served with them on the board as well. So I've experienced them individually and together in a lot of different contexts, and have always been impressed in various ways by the caliber of their practice, their maturity, their wisdom, their good humor. They all have their own very fine senses of humor, and I have wonderful memories of all 3 of them that I'd love to share, but I'm actually just going to step down now and turn things over to these 3 wonderful men. And I believe, who's going to start?
Thiradhamma.
Thiradhamma's going to start. Okay. Over to you guys.
Okay, well, hi. Thank you, Chidayo. A very nice introduction, especially the pictures of us in our youth.
Thiradhamma, I think you might be a little far from your microphone.
Is this any better?
That is
much better.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, thanks again, Chidayo. That was a delightful introduction. I had not seen photos of myself in my, 30s and 40s, whatever it was, for quite some time. And I'm really impressed with the number of people that are here. Thank you for coming. This is quite a turnout. It wasn't always this way, as you'll hear, as the 3 of us go through our presentations. I'll go ahead and start. I'll take it right back to the beginning, not so much the beginning of the movement, in the US. That happened a couple of years prior, but to the beginning of the whole idea of Aryaloka. And that came up in conversation back in the 1983 timeframe. The three gentlemen who came over from England to get the FWBO, as it was known then, established in the US, had been holding classes and courses and such in a place they had rented in Jamaica Plain in Boston. And on Friday nights, they would hold a double meditation sit followed by a puja. I had been going to that, and I had gotten to know Manjivajra pretty well because he came out to a small town where I was living and gave a course in meditation over 4 months. So I followed that up with visits to the Jamaica Plain Center on Friday evenings. And on one Friday evening, I happened to mention to him, I said, you know, Manju, what we really ought to try to do is get a little place out in the country or something where we could go off, and just a handful of us go off and meditate from time to time, and go for walks in the woods and talk about our spiritual lives and so forth. And that was the seed, I guess. I have to say that what I had in mind was maybe an old abandoned hunting shack or a derelict camp or some other deserted building that we could squat or we could rent real cheap or something. And I was thinking in terms of 3, 4, or 5 people at a time going out there and just getting on with our spiritual lives. Well, you see where that was a wrong idea. We decided though that we would, well, the idea lingered in the air for several weeks, and we thought, well, you know, let's go out and see what's out there, just for the heck of it. We looked at some real estate listings, and we actually went out and looked at a couple of places. They were uninspiring. They were typical, what you might see in the multiple listing service. And besides, they were way out of our price range. We didn't have a price range. There was no range at all. We didn't have anything to speak of. But for some reason, we thought, well, let's go have a look. What harm can it do? So this went on for some weeks or even months, and I kept going to the Friday night sessions. And one night the subject came up again, and Manju recollected that he had received something in the mail, a brochure in the mail. And he went off into his room and he brought it out. There was this brochure of a property for sale, which consisted of 2 geodesic domes on 12, 13 acres of land in a place called Newmarket, New Hampshire. And it was rather inspiring. I mean, it captured the imagination. Look at this, you know, this is something we had not expected. So we decided, well, let's go have a look at this place. Just, you know, you never know what could happen. So we went up to Newmarket and we met the sellers, Naoto and Barry Inoue, a couple who was living there, raising their children there. Naoto and Barry had built the place using labor of friends in the area. Naoto was quite the craftsman, as you can tell by looking around Aryaloka. And we got to know them. And Naoto had a little business going out in the wood shop, or the two of them did, but he did most of the woodworking. And he had, what they were doing was they were cutting out little pieces that went into craft kits that they sold through Good Housekeeping, through classified ads in Good Housekeeping. So they had a little craft business going out in the wood shop, and Barry had a business in what is now the yoga room. And I don't remember exactly what that business was, but I know it had something to do with fabric because she had long, long cutting tables throughout the yoga room. And they also ran an alternative school for area kids that wanted to have something of an alternate education. That was in the rooms down below the yoga room that are now bedrooms. I presume they still are. A little fun fact: you might have noticed the really small windows in each of those bedrooms for the pull down flap and access to the outside. They were so that the kids could exit the building if necessary in case of a fire or other emergency. They were keen on us acquiring the place, and we were keen on acquiring it, but we had no idea how to go about it. I mean, we had a couple of crazy ideas. One was writing to Tina Turner, and she passed on the opportunity. We had other wacky printing and selling T-shirts, that kind of stuff. How would we get the money together to ever even start on something on a project like this? Well, I remember saying to Manager Roger, I said, "Look, we have to be very, very mindful of putting and keeping the cart before the horse if we're going to go down this road. Because if we try to do it any other way, if we try to do it the other way around, it's just not going to work because it's too impossible a project. It won't even get off the ground. So we need to just go for it. We need to put the blinders on and trust that the universe will organize itself and mobilize itself behind us and bring it on home somehow or another." So that was the spirit in which we undertook this thing. The sellers were motivated. The property had been on the market for some time and had no prospective buyers, except perhaps, well, yes, they had one buyer that was reasonably serious, and that was the prison system that wanted to use it for a halfway house. And Nacho and Berry's sensibilities were pretty well aligned with ours, and they just couldn't see themselves selling it to a prison. So they refused the offer. They didn't sell it. And it still remained on the market until we showed up. And how it all fit together, the mechanics of it all were that Nacho and Berry decided that they would finance it for us. They would provide owner financing if we could come up with some sort of an earnest money deposit, something, because they owned it outright. They didn't have a bank loan on it or anything. So they agreed to owner finance it. And we would have to come up with, I think it was something less than 10% of the asking price. And what they would do to help us come up with that was they would loan us their workshop, their woodworking shop. And so we took over. I say we, but I didn't have as much to do with it as Manjaraja did. He was on site all the time. I had a full-time job and I was raising a daughter along with my wife. And he and a couple of others got started in the workshop, cutting out little hearts and sending them off as part of these craft kits. So we had owner financing going for us. Manjaraja got on the phone to an order member in England and asked if he would consider making a small loan to help us with the down payment. And he did. He gave us the entire amount that we thought we needed, which I think was about $10,000. It might have been more, but I think that was it. And that satisfied Nacho and Berry, and we drew up the papers, and we owned a couple of domes out in the woods in New Hampshire. There were other members of the order that came over from England to help out. I saw what we were up to, and they wanted to pitch in. And list off a few names that you may or may not have heard of, but there was Dharma Bandhu, Beladitya, Ratnapani, Buddhapalita, Vidyavati. I don't remember exactly the timing of who arrived when, but with their help, we were able to put together the first retreat, the first official retreat at Aryaloka in the summer of 1985, which was just about 40 years ago. Now, you might think that that was the end of the story. Okay, we had succeeded and that's that. Well, it was the beginning of all kinds of difficulties. And again, the timeline is a bit blurry, but these are the sorts of things that happened at the time. We experienced tremendous resistance from the neighbors. They did not want us in their neighborhood. It was brought up that they thought we were Satan worshipers, baby eaters. There was some sort of a foreign cult that was trying to land there in the midst of their neighborhood. They used zoning as a way to move us out. And Manjaraja had to go before the board of this or that in the town of Newmarket and explain himself, explain what he was doing there. He did his best, but we didn't have too much standing when it came to zoning regulations if the people who ran the town did not want us to comply with, to be in compliance with them. So they sicked their town lawyer on us and we had to find a lawyer and react to that. So what we wound up doing was establishing ourselves as a 501c3 religious organization. And we went and got nonprofit status as well. And that in effect made us a church. So the town lawyer, as I understand it, got together with our lawyer and they had a conversation around whether or not they wanted to get into a church versus state legal dispute. And they decided no, they didn't want to get anywhere near that. And so over time, the town fathers changed. The leadership of the town changed. And the new leadership was not all that bothered by us being there. We've been there for a while now. And some of the neighbors, instead of resisting us, thought we were quite good neighbors because, I mean, I don't know if the people still there who own the horses as you walk out the drive, but they were very happy to have us there because we didn't bother the horses, we didn't feed them, we were quiet, and we occasionally went for walks 2 by 2, which that's okay, that's about as disruptive as we were. And so the objections to us, I guess we kind of simply outweighted them, and we became a part of the community. There was also, during this period of time, ongoing financial stress. And I would have to say that probably lasted for 10 years, maybe more. You saw the pictures of the domes when there was tar on the roof in order to keep the leaks out. Well, there was a long period of leaks coming through the roof where we'd have pots and pans all over the place with towels in the bottom of them so the dripping wouldn't disturb us too much. We were also heating with wood, which was not the safest thing we could be doing, but also there were some very, very, very cold winter mornings. I remember up in the shrine room after we had lit the wood stove, where we had 3 blankets around us and we were watching our breaths, not counting our breaths, just watching them. Icy breaths while we were up there. We'd do 2 or 3, we'd do double, triple meditations. I think it was as much because we didn't want to come out from under the blankets as it was for any spiritual conscientiousness. um, then after a period of time, and I think it was probably 2 or 3 years of this, 4 years of this, maybe 2 or 3 years, management came to us and said, look, I don't think we're going to make it. I don't think this is viable. It's not sustainable. We're not making the money we need to accommodate the debt and the running expenses. And he said, I think we're going to have to throw in the towel. I think we're just going to have to abandon the project, turn the property back over to Nato and Berry, and arrange to meet in one another's houses. So the loss of the center was imminent, and that's when the Gang of Five came about. You may have heard of that, but there were 5 of us that were not going to hear of that. And we just decided we need to mobilize somehow. So we got together. It was myself, Linda Fury, now Barda, her late husband Dennis Fury, Bob Forgione, a friend from Exeter, and Paul Thorrington, a friend from Northwood. And we got together, we met every week for quite a number of months, and we put together what I would regard as a proper business plan. We went through all the steps that would need to be taken in order to make this a viable operation, kinds of programs we need to put on, what any ancillary sources of income we might be able to find. It was complete with financial projections and all the rest of it. And Manager was involved to a degree, but we effectively went to him at the end of this period and said, look, we can do this, this can be done. And what he said was that it wasn't so much the business plan or the approach that we were taking, but the fact that there were 5 locals, meaning people from the US and not England, that were prepared to get behind this and actually show the commitment to make it work. And that kind of turned everything around. Gave him, it sustained him. I mean, it gave him, he was pretty disheartened, but this kind of propped him up and told him, yeah, maybe we can do this. And so on we went. And that was, and that was sort of the end of the beginning of Aryaloka, if you will. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Surakshita for, I think you're going to talk about the next phase in the development or your experience of Aryaloka. Anyway, take it away, my friend.
Hey, buddy. So I like to look at Aryaloka. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to look at Aryaloka as the end in a way of a mythic journey. And it was, and in that time frame when I first came upon it was my mythic journey. I started looking at Buddhism. I didn't know anything about Buddhism back in 1975. And strange as it might seem, it was a Catholic priest that led me in that direction, actually a monk by the name of Tom Merton. And for some of you my age, you'll know some of these names because they go back a fair piece. And then I ran into Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher, and it was about Buddhist economics. And being a total flat-out progressive, I was really enthralled with this whole thing, and the idea that there were Buddhist economics. It's the way the Buddha would look at things, maybe if you were here in this day. So I started proceeding down this mythic path. And in 1983, I was in Kuwait City, and I ran across a book by New England monk, Peter Matheson. It was called The Snow Leopard. And I can remember it vividly. I got to page 100 in that book, talking about the Bodhisattva ideal. And it suddenly dawned on me that I'd been reading Buddhism since 1975. And yeah, maybe I was a Buddhist. And I determined, yes, I am a Buddhist. So that was really a bellwether evening reading that book and realizing that I was a Buddhist. But where to go? And then I just proceeded on reading. That was my path, reading. And I just remember, I read a ton of books, but the ones I remember is What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Rahula. Alone with Others by Stephen Batchelor. Old Path, White Cloud by Thich Nhat Hanh. And so this was my path, and I was reading this book. And then in 1988, in the fall of 1988, my wife Sue, who was a teacher, and she had the Gifted and Talented program at Buddhapalita High School here in the area. She brought a bunch of kids up to University of New Hampshire to hear about Buddhism. But lo and behold, guess who was talking about Buddhism? Manjavajra. And so, she knew I was really interested in this. She came home very excited, and we found out that the guys at Aryaloka were holding meditation sessions, but in Portsmouth. They'd rented a place in Portsmouth. And so we went for 2 Thursday nights, and we learned mindfulness the first night and met to the second night. I was very excited. She wasn't. She went one way and I went another way, but luckily enough, it was the path I was on, and suddenly the path looked a whole lot different. And I happened to be reading a book at that time frame, which I found, I have no idea where, because I used to haunt bookstores. By the way, there was a time when it was hard to find Buddhist books. And I found a book by Subhuti. And I was reading that book actually when I came to those meditation sessions. And I talked to Manjavajra about the fact that I was reading this book and yada yada. And he says, I'm going to do a class beginning in January and in Portsmouth, and we're going to study that book. So it was all the things that my friend Thiradhamma and all those English guys had done, all that hard work to find a place to focus on, to be part of. It was there. I had found it. And so in 1989, I was took that course. In April, I went on retreat at Aryaloka. Everything was happening pretty fast here. And in August, with 5 other men and women, I became a novice. And so, I was kind of on my way. And I lived in this world, which is something that, we need. I feel I have to talk about just a little bit. I lived in a world I was fairly old. I had 2 grown, almost grown kids. And my practice revolved around the Buddha and my family, and which was important because that's what a lot of us were, and especially the rest of the gang of 5. We were, by and large, family people. And here we are trying to coexist with Brits who did not understand our culture and did not understand being married and having children and all those other responsibilities. But we coexisted and started to understand each other. But I must tell you, that was a process, no doubt about it, along with trying to finance it and keep everything running. And that whole piece was very important and interesting. um, Bonte came in first time in 1991, as I remember. And so I had an opportunity to meet the founding monk of our order. I'd heard a lot about him, and so I had a chance to experience him and experience his intellectual ability, as well as his calmness. He was a very calm man. So I found my home at Aryaloka. I met the founder of the order. In fact, I met him a couple times in that next couple years. He was over here, and which is great because I mean I can say I knew the guy that started it all, and yeah, so that was kind of fun, and and then as Thiradhamma was saying, we the Gang of Five started taking over a lot of financial responsibilities, trying to figure out how to pay the bills. Pretty mundane stuff, but absolutely important. And Manjavajra asked me if I would start a mandala of supporting friends. So we pull that together as part of our business solution, and that exists even to this day. And it was very, very helpful in paying the bills and making people realize that you just didn't keep these buildings going on, keen Buddhist wishing. It took cold hard cash, and then in I'd like to jump to 1994. Yeah, 1994. And Thiradhamma will remember this well. Some of us went on a big retreat to India. And Thiradhamma, of course, got ordained there along with, oh God, my mind.
Thiradhamma,
Yeah.
Kamadhamma,
I had a brain
Suryadhamma.
cramp there, yeah. But anyhow, it was intense. It was so much fun. But what it was exposure to the wider order and to the movement across the whole world, because the retreat was in India, and there were people from all over the world there, and there were the ones I remember most specifically, of course, guys from England, men, mostly men, Australia, the United States, Germany, and then many from India. And we had the great get together up in the Ghats at the retreat center. And I think all of us will remember, who were there, will remember the night of the retreats, of going to the shrine room. And in the shrine room was very modern, and it had a huge alabaster Buddha overlooking the hills, the mountains, and into the caves of where the Indian monks 2,000 years ago had lived and practiced. And we did a walk to those caves. We had a service at those caves, and then we came back and we had to get ready for what would be the ordination the following day. Now, the funny part of this one was I asked one of the order members, the Indian order members, I said, so we're going to have this ordination. I hear there's going to be some people there. Oh, he said, oh, yes. And you know how the Indian people speak sometimes. Yes. They'll repeat themselves. Yes. And then he says, and I says, well, how many? And he said, 10,000. And I said, 10,000. I was like stunned. But what an experience. 10,000 people. I kind of wrote him off in my mind. until next morning, and the buses started showing up from Pune, from Bombay, from that whole area. And yes, by the way, there were 10,000 people there that day that witnessed that ordination. I mean, that's one to remember forever, team at Thiradhamma. 10,000 people at your ordination. It was wonderful. So that is about where I want to stop on my journey. I had found Aryaloka. It was kind of, in a way, a destination, in a sense. I had been exposed to our leader. I had been exposed to the greater order across the world. And here we are, 30 some odd years later, and I'm retired. But it was a long, beautiful run. I feel like the title of that book by Thich Nhat Hanh, you know, I'm at a period of old path and white clouds. That's where I am, and I'm going to pass it on to my buddy, Vidhuma.
Well, thank you. Thanks. It's great to hear the history again and hear the stories. It sure brings back a lot of special memories to me. Funny stories, serious stories, hard times, good times. I'm going to go back to my story of meeting Aryaloka and it becoming such an important part of my life. So my story begins in January of 1989. I live in Bow, which is a small town just outside of Concord. And my circumstances were that I was married to a wonderful woman, had 2 kids, 9 and 11 years old, worked. My work took about 50 to 60 hours a week on a typical week. So my life was really full, and it was good. I loved my work, loved my family, but I always had a feeling of something missing in my life. And when my wife, who's now an order member, Aryaloka, she was ordained before I was, actually, so she's my senior. We saw an article in the paper that there was going to be a meditation class offered in Concord by a group of Buddhists from Newmarket. They were going to come once a week for an 8-week course in meditation. And we thought, okay, let's just see what happens. Our kids were getting a little bit older. We had a neighbor who was a good, they were comfortable with. I could work out my work schedule because I had freedom over it. Although it was pretty consuming, I could still arrange it. So we signed up and we started a meditation class, 8 weeks, that began in February of 1989. More than 30 people signed up for the class, by the way. It was very popular. And 1989, you're right, there wasn't a lot of books on Buddhism. I mean, we had read some things. We knew a little about Zen. We read Wisdom of Insecurity and The Taboo Against Knowing Who You Really Are by Alan Watts. Those were really great. The Snow Leopard was really, really good also. So we had done some reading and were kind of primed for something. We showed up at the meditation class, and the first night we met Manjuvajra, we met Buddhapalita, who was also there. We met Linda Viam, who's now Varda, and also Phil Travis, who's now Manapa, and he's in the West Coast. Manjuvajra was an amazingly good teacher. He was a wonderful teacher. I'd say a gifted teacher. He had a good way of connecting with people. He had a good way of teaching meditation, and he knew a lot about Buddhism. So we took the 8 weeks, and after the first week, he said, anyone who wants to stay on after the meditation and learn a little about Buddhism. I'm going to do an introduction to Buddhism. We're going to study a book called Buddhist Vision by a man named Alex Kennedy, his ordained name was Subhuti. So we decided we'd do that. So 8 to 10 every Monday night, 8 weeks. They decided to continue it another 8 weeks at our request, so 16 weeks. And the more we learned about Buddhism, the more I felt like this is a really good thing for me. Meditating was a really good thing for me. Developing a regular, serious meditation practice was a really good thing for me. Understanding Buddhism was a really good thing for me. And the people I was meeting was a really good thing for me. So all these work together. I went on my first retreat, probably not until June or July of that year at Aryaloka, but I came on an open house day. I came to some work days. And by the way, on those work days, I can remember stacking wood around the domes. And it was a huge pile of wood that went around most of the domes. And I can remember on that later that winter, we were doing this in the summer and fall. In the winter, yeah, there was a wood stove in the yoga room and a wood stove down in the lobby, and getting them fired up and getting things warm. It took a while before there was any heat in that building, really. There was heat on the bottom side under the yoga room, but the shrine room was ice cold that first winter. I can remember, yeah, you're right, not just counting breaths, but watching our breaths crystallize as we breathed out. Yeah, so I came to some work days. I came to some weekend retreats. And I was a good student, but a slow student. I mean, I couldn't like take a crash course in this. I had responsibilities that really took up a lot of my time and a lot of my energy. But I sure had plenty of energy for the retreats that I went on too. And I came to love retreats that were about the Pali Canon and about the life of the Buddha. And realizing the Buddha's life, the stories that describe the life of the historical Buddha and his encounters with all these different people that are described in the suttas. So I came to understand how Buddhism played itself out in the life of the historical Buddha. And also I'm watching and taking in how Buddhism plays its part in the life of these 20th century British Buddhists who were not monks. I mean, the as it was called at that time, the Friends of the Western Buddhist Order and the Western Buddhist Order were not monks and not lay people. It was designed to be a Western oriented kind of practice of Buddhism, bringing it to the West. And it wasn't Tibetan Buddhism, and it wasn't Zen Buddhism, and it wasn't Korean Buddhism or Japanese Buddhism. It wasn't anything except it incorporated all the Buddhist traditions into it. It was a sweeping kind of, how does Buddhism make its way through history, and how is it going to play itself out now in the 20th century in Western cultures? So we were excited about this, and the more we learned, the more exciting it got, really. There were other teachers who were really good. I became a mitra in 1994. The head of the mitra class at that time was Buddhapalita, who's now in Montana. Very good teacher. The teachers just understood Buddhism, and they could talk about it in terms of 20th century terms. So that was really, really great. And I had I felt like I found something that I had been searching for without really understanding my search, but it was answering questions about what can I believe that's going to help me in this life? What is this human life about? I mean, Buddhism is about human suffering is the word that's used, but it's really about human difficulties, the difficulty of human life. How do people address the difficulties of human life. In my work life, I was seeing this every day, and I was trying to make sense of the struggle that human life is. Even under the best circumstances, people have no, like, don't have a happy day every day. They don't. I mean, money isn't the answer. Even being with people you love isn't the answer. That you need some grounding somewhere about something that you can believe in and you can live by, and you can live it out every day. And it's your guide, it's your rock that you can feel a faith in it. And I could feel that growing in me from the inspiration of the life of the Buddha, but also from the history of Buddhism as it evolved and as it was described in so many different beautiful writings, and as it was being played out before me. Because Aryaloka, for all its ups and downs, all its vicissitudes, all its struggles, all its hardships, and there were plenty of them, it was people who were committed to trying to live their life out according to these 2,500-year-old teachings of this gifted awakened Buddhist man. And the more you understand about the teachings, in a way, the more profound insight you realize the historical Buddha had into this human life and into human relationships and into human existence. So I was on a journey that was just taking me deeper and deeper to a place that I just wanted to keep exploring more and more. I became a Mitra so that I could move into a more, quote, advanced study group, deeper study of Buddhist texts, all kinds of Buddhist texts, and study it with other people who were in had the same interest, which was really great, because the study itself, I mean, the people in the Mitra classes were wonderful. The bonds that were formed between them, but the questions, the things we learned from each other, as well as from the various people that taught. A teacher from England, Paramashanti, came and taught at Aryaloka, lived at Aryaloka for several years. Thiradhamma came from New Zealand. They all became involved in teaching Mitras and involved. I asked to be ordained in 1995, and that carries you to another place. I was ordained in 1997. And in 1997, when I was ordained, the whole story of Aryaloka was in this really great flux. People from England were going different directions and leaving. The finances were tough in the late 1990s. After I was ordained, I was on the board. I mean, it was a nonprofit as well as a church, and we had a board that met that was responsible for the finances. We'd meet in my office and different people's offices because we all were outside of Aryaloka. It was an hour away from, 45 minutes away from where my job was. We struggled with how to make it work better. We did keep working at that. I think that's always been a struggle, but a wonderful struggle, because finding all the good teachers that we found, training all the good teachers that we trained, was its own wonderful learning experience for me. I mean, I can't list all the people that I learned from that have been precious to me, and all the teachings that have affected my life. So it's not just meditating, it is meditating, but it's also understanding yourself, understanding other people, and sharing all this learning and all this practice with other people who are kind of interested in the same trip that you're interested in. So I became a teacher at Aryaloka. I loved leading retreats. I loved teaching Mitra class. Surakshita and I taught Mitra class for years. We taught men's Mitra class on Monday nights. It was a great group of people too. I mean, the questions, the challenges to us as teachers, and just learning from each other was such a rich experience. So Aryaloka's been a wonderful gift to me. I mean, I can remember helping work on taking some of the foam off the roof. That was like a project that went on for a couple of years. There was a lift that they rented for, I don't know, more than a year that was out there in the yard, and chunks of foam would be thrown off the roof, and I'd be on the ground picking up these chunks of foam with tar on them, and it was just amazing. The buildings did get really totally renovated. So I'm going to stop for a minute and just divert a bit. Some of the richest experiences for me with Aryaloka, and I can't really rank them all, but these are standout experiences, were my own ordination at Aryaloka with Buddhapalita. I think Buddhapalita is with us tonight too. I think I saw him there. We were ordained together in 1997 by the Riverside at Aryaloka. And later on, I became a preceptor, and I ordained 3 men that was really indescribable, wonderful experience sitting there, witnessing them take vows and make commitments to a life that I was trying to live, and they were committing themselves to living. So I ordained Arjava, I ordained Bodhana, and I ordained Sachida. All 3 of those were like crystal moments in my emotional and whole life. I mean, they were all like tear-jerking experiences, very emotional experiences, to sit with those people as they repeated their commitments. So all those experiences played a part. Arjava was a ball of fire and an amazing donor in terms of what he gave to the center, money-wise and time-wise. So Aryaloka got a new roof, which was a huge project. It got finished inside. Every window was replaced with windows. His commitment was to bring Aryaloka up to up-to-date safety codes. Electrical work was essentially redone from service entrance to everything else. Akasha Loka became a community and was brought up to code at that time. The parking lot was expanded. Publicity increased, and our attendances increased. Slowly but steadily, sort of all of us who were working were committed to this Buddhist life that's between monks, nuns, and lay people. I mean, this was Buddhists trying to live out the Buddhist teachings, but not in a monastery, in real life, with real families, real kids, real struggles. And to me, it was a continuing success story. It was like weaving a tapestry, and the tapestry was getting richer, more complex, more beautiful, and even the irregularities began to take their own patterns. So I was lucky enough to be part of a historical process where Aryaloka moved from the handful of brave British and New Zealand people who got it going at the beginning to all Americans who were living their regular American life, trying to make the Buddhist world fit with American culture, and trying to live our lives out in a way that we committed ourselves to living up to these ridiculously high Buddhist standards. But it's been a pleasure. It's been a wonderful trip, really. It's been a wonderful journey, and it still is a wonderful journey. I mean, that's why I'm still here after it's been 35 years since the first time I took a class and met somebody from Aryaloka. It's been, I guess, 34 years or around the same amount of time since I first drove down that crooked, bumpy dirt road to these crazy double domes. Yeah, it's been a wonderful trip. So maybe we should open it up to some questions at this point, or comments, or anything anybody wants to talk about?
Well, a number of you mentioned Buddhapalita, and since he's here, I thought we might invite him to say a couple of words too.
No way.
Hey, Buddhapalita.
Hey, Buddhapalita.
Hi,
Wait.
who's that?
Signatory. Hi.
Would you like,
Oh,
Buddhapalita, would you like to share a few remembrances of those times?
I don't know if we have. I don't know how long you've got left. I'm actually in Mexico right now, so little time difference. But I will say some things. I must say that it's really lovely to see old friends. Vidhuma, Thiradhamma, Surakshita, and all the others that are there that I can see, but the screen is so small. I'm sure Shudayu's there.
Yeah.
But the commitment that people have put into making Aryaloka what it is really inspiring. I mean, each and every one of these order members have done so much. I feel like, I lived there for 10 years. It's quite a big chunk of my life was living at Aryaloka and the community there. And I was just thinking the commitment that people had to drive an hour, sometimes more, just to make it to a Mitra study group, or that was amazing to me. And all the volunteer work that people did, that Vidhuma reminded me of. I've got some photographs from some of those work days, and you'd have people like, well, Punya, who passed sadly, but his son would be there, and Vidhuma's kids would be there. Thiradhamma would sometimes bring Susan to festival days. I remember her being at events like that, and it's. I must say, I feel a great deal of, should I say, pride? Maybe that's not the right word, but in what you have done. And a great deal of appreciation for it, because I know how hard it was for many of us, but just what you've done is amazing. And I want to thank you all for doing so much hard work. I feel like some of the people there, I mean, I'm thinking of Surakshita, Vidhuma, Thiradhamma, Shudayu, are very dear old friends, and Buddhapalita and I have known each other since about 1980. We met in England before we moved back to the States. For me, there's a very long history with people in the Sangha around Aryaloka. So I hope that at some point maybe I'll talk about some of my experiences and from living in the community, and but perhaps this isn't the right time.
Yeah, you get.
Great to hear from you and see you.
Yeah, really good to see you guys.
Great.
I'm gonna give Buddhapalita his own evening at some point in the next year. We're trying to schedule that with him.
Yeah,
I'm really pleased to see you there tonight as well.
Yeah, thank you.
So why don't we have some questions? If you're on Zoom, you can just unmute and ask a question, and if you're here, just raise your hand and call on you.
So I've heard of a legendary men's retreat where people were sleeping on what is now the screened-in porch. Were any of you there for that retreat?
No.
What was legendary about it?
Yeah.
How cold it was, and the fact that there were several feet of snow on the ground, and
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I'd forgotten about that.
Dharma Sukta here, and a big thumbs up to my private preceptor, Surakshita. I heard a story about an early Aryalokan who sledded down the hill out onto the river. Is that true? Did that
Yes.
That was
So,
about
it was an ice slide that went from the back of the barn all the way down the side of or the back of Aryaloka, down the pathway, all the way out to the river. And when I say ice, I mean it was built over quite a period of time, a couple of days and nights when it was freezing, and then it brought a hose out. I wasn't part of this, but this is what I heard. They iced it down, sprayed it so that it would freeze overnight, and it was a hell of a ride. It was scary. It would flow out onto the river and down the river until you came into branches and other nature's debris that would stop you. You'd want to stop them.
the beaver.
Yeah.
And thinking about the river, maybe it's hard to imagine right now, but that river used to flood when there would be a heavy rain, and there were several times when the water would be over the path that now goes down to the solitary. There were people who got stranded at times in the solitary when they were in the solitary and the water came up that high. And water was one of the great challenges. I mean, it isn't just that the roof leaked, it's that you'd be on a retreat and there'd be a few drips, and suddenly you would find anything that could hold water and be putting it, because there were dozens of places where there'd be drips. And after a while, we got to learn, as soon as the rain started, where to put the big buckets and where to put the small bowls, and how often they had to be emptied. But it was a watery place. Yeah.
This is going to pay to hi Buddhapalita. It's great to see you. I'd like verification of a story I've been telling for a while, and it's based on my coming down when the workshop was the workshop and was being used to make those little hearts and things. And it was a terrifying place, I thought. I was convinced the bandsaw was going to break and take somebody's head off. But I did hear a story that somebody was operating the table saw and there was kickback, and the piece of wood they were using shot through the wall. Is it true that it shot through the wall?
I don't know. I mean, there's certainly plenty of dents in the wall, but
so maybe he knows the answer.
Oh, yeah, we had a number of dangerous experiences. Visitor lost a part of his finger, I think. I got a bad concussion by getting one of those pieces of wood hit my chest.
Oh.
And none of us had insurance, so just sort of did what you could.
Well, I have to say, I did make a meditation bench there that I've used ever since. And you might sit down on it. And part of why it's special is I made it without any incidents like that.
Well, you've got to bear in mind, we mass produce things to keep Aryaloka going. We would make these parts, which would then be made into, like, coat hangers. But I think Manju Vajra and I figured out we probably made about 300,000 of those.
What?
So, because we'd only get like 20 cents for each one. And over the years, we made frogs' legs, we made all sorts of funny little wooden things that was sold in kits. So it was going, the machinery was going a lot, 8-9 hours a day.